Hi everyone. This course, is for the CompTIA Security Plus. If you want to clear the exam, this is all you need to study. If you understand these concepts clearly, I'm sure you are going to clear the CompTIA Security Plus exam in your very first attempt, right? So without wasting much of the time, let's go back and see what are we going to cover uh, you know uh, in this session, and of course the sessions which are going to come after this video, because everything can't be covered in a single video. We need to cover this up in multiple videos. So first thing, without even going through the content, I think it's a useless thing. So we have this much of content there. So let's walk through each of these and understand it further. I request your attention. Uh, Whatever is being taught here, just visualize that, repeat, within your head, and I'm sure you're going to be good. And once you repeat, if you want to write that somewhere in the notebook, just for practice purpose, that's even better. So without wasting much time, so let's go back to the topic. So the first topic that we are going to cover would be compare and contrast various types of security controls. So what are the various types of security controls? This is something that we are going to talk about today. The first one is the technical security control. As the description says, these are controls implemented through technology. They are often hardware or software based. So any control that is technical in nature is called a technical control. It's as simple as that. Examples. One of the core examples that's not given here, and that's something that the kids which have grown up during 90s, or probably earlier than that, or maybe in the next decade until 2000, 2005, even 2010, heard much about antivirus. One example that's not given here. So antivirus is a software which is built to make sure that the computer viruses are at bay. That example is not quoted here, but that's one of the examples of a technical control. Other examples, as we hear them: firewalls, encryption, password protection, which we called as encrypted data, encrypting. It has password, change in the data and all that stuff. So, well, that's a different subject altogether, which we are going to cover what encryption really means. And then we have intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system, authentication mechanism, like you log in by password, system authenticates you and allows you to log in. And then we have multi-factor authentication system also, that we are going to cover in the coming slides. And then access controls, like who has got access to what, and stuff like that. Advantages, definitely it has got advantages, because technical controls, the role they play right now, probably it's impossible to have such controls when, if you did not have technology helping you out with this. There is no other way. There was no other way, in fact. So that's a massive, and it can be applied to a massive infrastructure where you can't put manual controls. It's very difficult. You set up the controls once, and then kind of you keep ensuring that they are up to date, they are upgraded with time, they are not expired, and all that stuff. So well, that's a different topic about it, but technical controls, definitely a big yes. Talking about the disadvantages, if it is technical, it got to have disadvantages as well. The reason being, what is good today might not be good tomorrow. And if it is technical, that means it can be breached. You have hackers like red hat hackers and even the gray hat. So and different categories of hackers there. For some reason, they just want to hack your systems, and yeah, there are different tools at their uh, you know uh, desk are probably available with them. So take advantage of that. So these are some of the disadvantages, that they are vulnerable to technical failures or software vulnerabilities they have, can become obsolete as I was talking about, with technological advancement. So if you don't do advancement, you lose it out. So that's technical control, and that's all you need to understand about the technical control. It's as simple as it goes. Now let's talk about the managerial security controls. So the word manager says it all. Something that is managed. So let's go about the description. These controls involve strategies, governance, and the organizational approach to information security. They ensure the right policies and procedures are in place. So basically, each and every company, they have their own strategies. They have their own governance around the security controls. They come up with policies, do's and don'ts. They have to follow some of the policies, from different federal structures. I mean, as well, like how you have in US and rest of the other countries, you have the local government policies. They need to frame to ensure that data elements, the personal information, customer information, and a lot of other stuff, a lot of other data is secured, so that it's not misused in any way. So those are all called as managerial security controls. Examples would be risk assessments. So risk assessments are conducted to ensure we are secure, right? So we have a questionnaire, you answer that, you evaluate that, you find the flaws in it, you see after risk assessments if there are particular controls with respect to the data that is collected, is it there? And it's a deep topic, but we do not need to understand that deep as far as the CompTIA Security Plus goes. So everything within the exam would be covered in this session, so don't worry about it. So risk assessments, definitely security policies, as I was talking about, like who gets in physically, who gets into the campus, example, and who isn't allowed. That's why you have security at the gate. And then data storage, who goes in, who goes out, biometrics, and all that stuff, whatever you can think of. And procedure, security training programs. So training programs are also provided, and the vendor management. So vendor management, because if you procure some vendor, they are doing something for you, it's very important that they also are managing the data quite well, and they have their own policies and procedures in place, and basically they meet the expectation what you have with them. So that is example of managerial security control. Let's talk about the advantages. Addresses the organization's overall security posture, definitely, and ensures compliance with legal and regulatory requirements. I was talking about federal structure, right? Policies like HIPAA, PCI, if they are not followed, the company is really in the loop, and they can be sued, and at times the business can be shut down if it is like too much of deviation. So it is pivotal for strategic decision making. Disadvantages: effectiveness can be influenced by the level of managerial commitment. There is a need for regular review and updating. So how you perform risk assessments, what security policies you have, are those implemented with the highest integrity at place? is availability, availability, integrity, maintained. So all these things matter. That's why effectiveness of these can be a problem sometimes. But that's all you need to know about the managerial security control. So then we have operational security controls. So sounds quite similar than the managerial, but they are a bit different. These controls are focused on operations and are often associated with the day-to-day tasks and procedures that users or administrators follow. So they are the daily operation security controls. So what tasks you do, for example, within your organization or any organization, what tasks are done on the daily basis. So these controls are related to those tasks. For example, backup and recovery procedures. So what is the backup if there is some disaster or something like that? So what is the backup and recovery procedure? That's an operational control. User awareness training, that's an operational control. Incident response procedure and change management, that's an operational control. So basically your employees, any company's employees, how they are operating on a daily basis, with what security policies keeping in mind. For example, password policy, tailgating, and so many other things, role-based access, sometimes floor-based access. So all these come part of the operational security controls, right? Then we have advantages of it. So directly addresses user behavior, day-to-day operations. Definitely it's a user behavior. So when we talk about operations, it's daily means it's related to the user. So we're talking about the user behavior on a day-to-day basis, which are often the weak points in security. Definitely it can be an internal threat sometimes. If a person decides to share the data deliberately on his or her social media page, or probably they can do something which might not be good for the company. So definitely that is going to worry. So disadvantages, so requires continuous monitoring. Definitely if tailgating, so someone has to check out what you're doing on the floor, someone has to check out. Password management is, someone has to check out this also, although this is not checked as such, but then it can be a disadvantage at the same time. So to follow procedures, it's vulnerable to human error. So human error, it's always vulnerable to human error, right? So sometimes it can be deliberate and sometimes it can be just a miss. Physical security controls means like physically when you are within that within that area. For example, so like let's go by the description. These controls are designed to protect the physical environment of information assets. Example: security guards, fences, locks, CCTV cameras, biometric access control, secure server rooms, and fire suppression systems. They're all in every building that you go. You will see security guards, you will see CCTV cameras, you will see fences, you will even see bullards. Bullard is those steel made pillars which don't allow some vehicles to kind of pass by. So that also can be a physical control. Presence of biometric access controls can also be a physical control. Anything which has to do with the physical things, so it comes under the physical security control. Advantages: provides tangible protection against physical threats such as theft, damage, and natural disasters. Definitely, yeah. So someone has an injury to the facility, just like that. There's always that threat. They can end up damaging the property. Taking something which is of value with them, like systems, anything like CCTV camera systems, anything which comes to their mind. Yeah. Disadvantages: does not protect against remote cyber threats, requires physical maintenance. Yeah, I mean, obviously this is only for the physical purpose. It can't be, cyber security is all about systems, all about technology, so really not useful in that field. So, all right, so these were the 4 security controls: technical, managerial, operational, and then physical security controls. So I hope this is pretty clear to you. Contrast implementation nature. Technical controls are mainly implemented through IT systems, of course. So they always can be implemented through the IT systems and infrastructure. Managerial controls are executed at the decision making level. So when you have managerial controls, obviously it has to be implemented by the decision making body. Say, for example, the BSOs, the chief security officer, CISOs, and board of directors. So it has to be implemented by them. We also call that as platinum team, gold team, and silver team at times. So it has to be implemented by those teams. While operational controls relate to routine process, so this has to be controlled by the the on-floor leadership, all the time. So this can't be implemented by board of directors. Definitely, they can provide the guidelines, but then execution is basically up to the floor manager. So it just like works like legislation and execution. So managerial controls, they are legislated by the higher authorities, while they are executed, then those are executed in terms of daily operations by the floor managers or on-site managers, so whatever you call them. So physical controls pertain to tangible assets and facilities, all related to tangible assets which can be touched, like hardware systems. So we're talking about hardware systems here. Any system, hardware system, which can be a threat, which can be, not threat as such, but which can be taken away by threat actors, are possessed or something like that. So yeah, I mean that those are physical controls. Vulnerabilities. What are vulnerabilities with these? So let's talk about vulnerabilities about it. Technical controls are vulnerable to technological flaws. So any technological flaws within technical controls can be all the time exploited. So right, so if for example a particular, say, firewall is out of warranty, it's not up to date, it's not upgraded, so it becomes vulnerable to attacks. And if it is vulnerable to attacks, it might not be useful, and this will lead to threat actors exploiting the situation and taking away what they want to take away. So managerial is lack of leadership commitment. If in terms of manager, as I told you, this is about the legislation, about the top leadership. If they lack that commitment in ensuring that we have right policies, procedures in place, then that goes for a toss. So that's always vulnerable. Operational is to human errors. So that's very important. Humans make any error. So for example, there's a phishing mail, it comes to their mailbox. They are supposed to identify the phishing mail, they are not supposed to hit the link, but they do, and then they are like, finally you end up landing in some kind of a ransomware as such. So any other such problem. And then physical access breach, we understand them. If someone physically breaches the access, and then does some harm to the organization, to the facilities. Overhead and maintenance. So when we talk about overhead and maintenance, we're talking about the cost, how costly it is, how difficult it is to maintain. So technical controls are often of high costs initially. Technical controls are always of the high cost, but then the role these technical controls play over the period of time, you will feel that no, this was worth taking a shot at, to ensure that our assets are they're safe. And technical controls often have high initial costs and need consistent updating. That we know that even the laptop I'm using today, 5 years down the line, or probably 10 years down the line at the most, I will not be using that because it will be out of that advanced technology, out of the gear there. So managerial controls requires periodic review and adapting to the organization's changing landscape. So I mean, legislation, laws, these are not some of the laws, and most of the laws are not fundamental laws. So you need to change with the change in the landscape, with the change in time, with the change how the markets turn out to be, how different the world is. You always need to make sure that your controls, your regulations are are what do you say? They are basically addressing the current challenges. Yeah, the word addressing. Okay, so operational controls demand continuous user training and oversight. So you keep training people, you keep telling them about, say, for example, phishing, wishing, smishing, password policies, tailgating. You tell them about, a lot of other stuff that is pretty much required when they're operating on a day-to-day basis. Physical controls need regular physical maintenance and checks. Physical controls, well, it looks simple, can be complex at times, but then yeah, I mean from the understanding point of view, it's easy to understand that it got to be the physical control that needs to be in check all the time. Application domain. So while all controls can be applied to various domains, technical controls are especially pertinent to in IT and digital domains. So all these controls can be applied to various domains like managerial, operational. For example, even if there is no IT system in place, you still sometimes need like, let's talk about the government services. You need those regulations. Federal government, you need those regulations, laws, compliance, this and that. uh, but not necessarily the IT and digital domains. I mean, you need technical controls. Maybe they are not using some kind of a technology, maybe it's not some kind of an important technology that needs so great controls. So, I mean, that's what it says. Managerial controls span across all areas of an organization. Definitely, yes. Whether it's technical or something, I mean, whatever security controls or managerial controls has to be for all, even for the technical controls. That is also decided by the managerial controls. Basically, the legislation, which I call as board of directors, the CISO, the company BSOs, they need to come. Our platinum, gold, and silver teams, they need to come together and make sure that we have the right controls. It also includes the right technical controls. So managerial control is pretty important from that point of view. They're the one who decide what controls need to be there. Then operational controls are common in IT operations, HR, and other daily functions. Physical controls are crucial for facilities management and asset safeguarding. Pretty simple. A balanced security strategy usually involves a mix of these controls, ensuring that assets are protected at multiple levels and through various means. So, when you mix up all these controls, which has technical, managerial, operational, physical, when you involve all of these controls, it yields good results. You need all of these controls. In fact, it's very, very important for the business to survive, for the trust of the customers in your organization, in your company, whether it is a small company or a big company. Well, that can be discussed and debated, but yeah, I mean, these controls are all important. Security controls can also be categorized based on their functionality and the stage of the incident they address. Let's dive into comparison and contrast of the types you mentioned. So let's say, security as they say, security controls also can be categorized based on their functionality. So what functionality they are in, and the stage of the incident they address. At what stage um, of the incident they kind of address. So preventive security controls. So as the name goes, see, I mean, one is you have a security control in place. So there are security controls like which are always preventive. They're always preventive in nature. So follow this, it will prevent this episode. And then you have corrective, means something has happened and now you want to correct that. And some of the, so this is how it generally works. So let's take a look at one, each one of those. So preventive security controls. Description. So these controls aim to prevent an incident or breach from occurring in the first place. When we say preventive, we are actually trying to prevent. So let's talk about firewalls. You install firewall on your system or network, right? Firewall can both be software and hardware, right? For example, Sonic Wall is one of the hardware firewalls, and one of the most used one, I believe. Right. So you have managerial, security controls. They have laid down the policies, procedures which need to be followed. So if you follow that, those, for example, you should not be clicking on any of the unknown links which hits your inbox. It's a preventive one. So they're important. They're very, very important. I think this is one of the first controls that comes to anyone's mind, because there always has to be that preventive controls in place so that people know what they do not need to do. They do not need to know. One is like what they need to do. The second one is what they should not be doing so that they fall in the trap. Very important. So firewalls, access controls, strong password policies, encryption and security training. So all of these, all of these are preventive controls, right? Very important. In encryption of the data, when you share the data, whether the data is in a persistent data, or is it in transit, or probably you store the data. So they all, if it is encrypted, it is, you have that double check, okay, it's safe. Nobody is, even if someone hacks, they don't get to see the data because it is encrypted, and they don't have the key to decrypt the data, right? So important training, security training, because for operations, operational control, from the operational control point of view, you need to train your people, your staff. Primary function acts proactively to ward off potential threats. So this acts proactively to ward off the potential threats. So it's a proactive measure. Okay, if I take the umbrella in the rain, I am not going to be wet. So umbrella is nothing but a proactive measure, right? So that's how it works here as well. So deterrent security controls, the security controls which are deterrent in place, in nature, means they are kind of threatening. When I say deterrent, it means, it stops you, it makes you think, okay, if I do this, the result would be like this. For example, if you hack someone's bank account, and then there is a security control, you also have read that if you do that, the police is going to be behind you. The police works as a deterrent to you here in this case, right? So let's talk about it. Description. While they might not prevent a threat actor from performing a malicious act, they deter or discourage them by increasing the risk or reducing the reward, right? So that's what I was talking about. So that deterrent, it might not prevent it, but then it will discourage them definitely. If I talk about taking someone's money, then I think about police, then it will make me think 10 times or 100 times before taking such an action. I may still end up taking such action, taking someone's money from the account, or do some nonsense thing, but then still, this is in the back of my mind, I always think, okay, I will be caught now, and I will have to face the jail term and so on. So examples: warning banners indicating legal consequences of unauthorized access. So there is a facility, there is a banner given there. So without your ID, you are not supposed to access. If you access, you might be arrested or something. So that's a deterrent kind of thing. So visible surveillance cameras and accounts will be locked after 3 unsuccessful login attempts and mechanism. For example, you enter login, passwords are given, your bank, your computer. If it is 3 times or 5 times, whatever times it is set for, if it is wrong, so it locks your account. So that acts as a deterrent, like you can't afford to repeatedly enter the wrong password. You may still do it, but then it has its own drawback. Primary function serves as a discouragement, making it less appealing for an attacker to proceed, right? So primary function is, it serves as a discouragement. It serves as a discouragement, making it less appealing for an attacker to proceed. That is the primary function. Detective controls. So we talk about preventive. Remember, let's go back. Preventive, which are there in, so that which are in place to make sure that it is prevented. You think, okay, what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, most important, what you're not supposed to do. So preventive action. Then deterrent security controls. Still a threat actor can do, or anyone can do it, but then they will think, okay, they will think 100 times before doing such a stuff, because there is some warning given to them. And then we have detective security controls. So this is a third category of security controls. So these controls are designed to discover or detect unwanted or unauthorized activity. So these controls are in place to make sure that such controls detect an unwanted activity. For example, there is a lot of network traffic going on in the night when nobody is working. That is one of the alerts. That's one of the some alerts, one detective alert, that something is not right. Okay, during weekends when nobody is working, there is a traffic moving across your network. That's one of the alert, right? There is a security control. There's a cameras, facility cameras. They are detecting some movement when nobody should be technically there. That is probably in that area, says, for example, server room. So that's one of the detective security control, and so many of those. And the most important thing that we talk about security controls, detective security controls, is the examples of intrusion detection system, what we called as IDS, audit logs, security information and event management systems, and anomaly detection. Intrusion detection system, so they are in place to detect any unwanted traffic through your network. Audit logs, so you go to the audit logs and check the activity which is taking place or which has taken place. Pretty important. Security information and event management, the SIEM system is what we call them. So they act as one of the detective security controls. So remember this, SIEM is a detective security control. IDS is a detective security control, but similar to IDS is IPS, which is intrusion prevention system, is a protective control in nature. It's not a detective control. Just don't get confused. One helps in detection, one helps in prevention. Prevention is different than detection. Detection is basically detecting something, finding out something right or wrong. Well, that can be debated. Primary function, identify and alert on anomalies or security incidents, right? So this is the primary function. So to identify and alert the right people, the admin, or whoever, the IT team, or anyone who is kind of in control of such activities, they get an alert. Okay, this is something which is not right, something which is not happening, which is not good, which is not in order. So they get alert, and then they go check, and and then the rest of the steps follow accordingly. Fourth one is corrective. So now that a mistake has happened, prevention, you probably did not take prevention, it wasn't detected, it happened. Once something happens, what you do, you correct that action, right? That's called as corrective security control. You made a mistake, there was prevention list in place not to make that mistake at first place, but then you probably ignored that. You made a mistake, it wasn't detected, probably it was detected later on, and you did not take action at that time also. Now the mistake has happened, it has taken place. Now, as a restoration process, you have to correct that action, correct that mistake. So once a security incident has been detected, these controls aim to limit the extent of damage and take action to correct the situation. So once something has been detected, okay, this is happening, data is being taken away by some third-party resource or some hackers from your network, you realize that you immediately come into action and stop that from being happening through different modes, methods and all. That's a different subject altogether. But then you take action, and this action is called as corrective action, and this control would be called as corrective security control. Examples: antivirus software that quarantines malware, incident response teams. So yeah, backup restoration tools and patches for known vulnerabilities. So now you have found there are vulnerabilities in your system and you've done the patch running. So generally done on a weekends, but then you can have that, scheduled downtime also for that, wherein you run such patches. Right. So these are some, corrective actions, corrective security controls, right? And some of these security controls sometimes may, act as a preventive as well. Sometimes they may act as deterrent as well, and sometimes they might act as corrective security controls as well. You just need to read the question carefully. If the question, see how the question is framed, and accordingly answer those questions. Primary function of these corrective actions, it remediate and recover from a detected security incident. Okay, fifth one, compensating security control. So what is compensating now? Something, when we say compensation or compensating something, you compensate for, like, let's go to the description straight. These controls come into play when primary controls are deemed ineffective or unfeasible, right? So these controls are the controls when the primary controls don't perform their function, they don't do their work. If they fail, basically, if the primary controls fail, the compensating controls come into picture. They provide alternative measures to achieve the same or similar security objectives. So they do the same thing. So you have a security guard at the front gate. He fails to do his duty, and someone is inside. But then at the reception there is one more security guard. But he does the same function as was supposed to be done by the main gatekeeper. He does the same function. So here in this case, the one at the reception can be called as the compensating control, a compensating security guard, like that. Example, so let's take some more examples. If a system cannot support multi-factor authentication, a primary control. So multi-factor authentication can be a primary control, like you log in by password, then you also have to use some semantic IDs and all, or any such key IDs. Excuse me. So if the system cannot support it, a stringent password policy and continuous user behavior monitoring might be applied as compensating controls. Now, if you don't have multi-factor authentication, now what you can do, you can as a substitute to this particular control, which is highly recommended. You can have a stringent password policy, maybe 8 characters with alphanumerical special characters, or maybe a passphrase, which is basically a phrase of 16 letters, or more than that, or whatever, as deemed fit by the company, by the organization that you work for. And then the monitoring of the user, like what all content he is accessing on his system, desktop or laptop. So we have threat hunting teams, we have penetration testing teams, other teams in place, so which make sure that they monitor the user behaviors and all that. And we also have the applications which can give you those such logs, which can let you know what this person is up to on a day-to-day basis. Primary function acts as backup or alternative to primary security controls. As I said, it's compensating means it acts as a backup for the primary security control. So primary security control, as example quoted here, is multi-factor authentication. If you don't have, no problem, we'll have a stringent password policy and we will monitor the user behaviors. 6. Directive security controls. Let's talk about the directive security controls. So description: these controls are used to guide or constrain user actions. Excuse me. Okay. So these controls are used to guide or constrain user actions, usually by stipulating mandatory or recommended actions, right? Examples: acceptable use policy. Like this is one of the, okay, you are being directed by the top management that this is what the policy. I mean, you should not be sharing your policy. Password. You should be using passphrase, not the the alphanumeric and all that stuff. Are you following that? Maybe you can't send mails out from your Outlook or from your mailbox to external email ID, although you have an access. So sometimes you should not access this particular website, maybe a porn website or something like that. So yeah, so these are the directives which you need to follow. That's what we call it as acceptable use policies. Security policies, guidelines, procedures, and standards. Primary function: provide a roadmap or guidance for security best practice within an organization. So all the security policies which are laid down there are for the betterment of organization. It's a roadmap. It provides a roadmap. It provides a guidance what is to be done and what is not to be done. Obviously, what is not to be done is something which will be harmful for the company, for the organization, for its brand, for its shareholders, and definitely for its customers. So directive security controls. When directive means directions, there are directions to do this and don't do that. All right, so let's talk about, okay, so 6 security controls which are categorized based on the preventive security controls, then deterrent, are they detective security controls, corrective security controls, then compensating security controls, directive security controls, and now let's talk about the contrast. Stage of intervention. So what stage is the best for such a security control for the intervention? For example, so let's understand it this way. Preventive controls act before an incident. Obviously, if the incident has not happened, the control that acts before would be called as a preventive control. For example, you should not be clicking on the phishing email, the link. That's a preventive. The directions has been given to you. That's a preventive control. But then you still do it. I mean, yeah, you can still do it and fall in the trap. So, but that will be called as preventive security control. You have directions not to do that. So preventive security acts before an incident. Also, preventive means firewalls here, antivirus here. So these are all part of the preventive security controls. So aiming to prevent it, obviously. Deterrent controls discourage attackers. It discourages. Oh, if you do this, you will get jailed. You will spend rest of your life in the jail. It's a deterrent, but may not necessarily stop them. Obviously, all the people don't think of jail all the time. Some people have the guts to, not mind it, and they still end up doing what they are supposed to do. Detective controls operate during or after the incident. So detective controls, they operate when the incident is actually happening, or it has happened, right? Obviously, detection, they are detecting something. You can only detect something, but when it is in the process, or probably the process has passed by. You can it doesn't work, besides these two stages. That's why it's called as detective control. Corrective control is once something is happening or something has happened, you take that corrective action. You take action to fix it. That's called as corrective control. So corrective controls come into action post incident to restore and rectify. Compensating controls work as an alternative to main control. So there is main control. If it doesn't work, then we have a compensating control, basically a backup control. to be honest. Basically a backup control. If primary control doesn't work, so we have a backup control, that's absolutely okay. Alright, so then, and directive controls provide guidelines for actions throughout all stages. Directive controls are the controls which always give you that direction is what needs to be done, and it applies to all the stages exactly like the managerial control, because as I told you, those are the people who form the rules and regulations unless and until something directly comes from the federal government or that government wherein you operate. Okay, so next topic is about interaction with threat actors. So let's discuss this. What is this all about? Threat actors is basically the bad elements which want to harm you some way or the other way. Preventive controls directly counter-attack threat actions. Preventive controls directly counteract threat actions. Deterrent controls try to scare them away, right? Detective controls monitor, of course they monitor, and alert on their activities. Corrective controls act to nullify or reduce their impact. Compensating control act as a secondary barrier, as we discussed, it's like a backup. And then directive controls often don't interact directly but set the stage for all other controls. They're all directions, do this, do that. Preventive should be this. In case of detection, your detection control should be this, corrective action should be this. Deterrent control, we can have, please have a poster which says if you do this, we do that. So yeah, I mean those all come from the directive controls. So that is how you interact with the threat actor. So everything applies to threat actor. Okay, then flexibility and adaptability. Preventive, deterrent, and detective controls are often specific to certain threats and or vulnerabilities. Of course, preventive, you might have thought something that what acts poses you a threat. You will make sure that your preventive controls are in alignment to that. You can't have all the preventive controls without having a base for that, without having to study what exactly is a threat to us. Based on your threat, you form the preventive control. Deterrent control, again, I mean it also has the same base, and so does the detective controls. So they are specific to certain threats and vulnerabilities. Is all I'm saying. Corrective control act based on the nature of detective incident. So right, corrective control only comes in place when you have a direct detective control in place. Once the detection happens, that's when the corrective action takes place. There is no corrective control if there is no detective control in place or detection in place. Right? If you can't detect what has gone wrong, how can you correct it? That's as simple as that. So corrective controls act based on the nature of detected incidents. Compensating controls are inherently adaptable as they are custom solution for unique problems. So compensating controls, you just want to be double sure. You just want to be double sure that something doesn't go wrong. And even if the primary control is not sufficient to kind of block that, you always have that secondary control which ensures that that problem is taken care of. Directive controls can be broad and flexible, providing guidance adaptable to various situations. So directive control, they are the decision makers. They direct you, and they can always change their directions based on the different scenarios, different what risk assessment has been done, what controls need to be in place, what is the cost for that controls, and it becomes a bigger topic, and they decide, they come up with the controls, they come up with all these things like what you need to be ensuring that this is something which should be as a preventive, then corrective and deterrent and all that stuff. A well-rounded security posture incorporates a blend of all these controls, ensuring that the threats are deterred, prevented, detected, and rectified efficiently with clear directives guiding the organization's overall security strategy. So a right control for any organization is a blend of all these security controls, right? They're all important as far as the organization goes. You can't just have one control. You need to have all these controls, as we understood why we need to have all these controls. You can't, for example, you can't solely depend on the technical controls, right? What about the managerial control? What about the prevention, or sorry, what about the managerial control? What about the operational control? Right? You may have a biggest technical control, but if your operational control is not right, you are still at the risk of getting into the hackers ecosphere, or you can still be their victim. So all these work in a way. We'll be talking next about fundamental security concepts. That's coming up in the next video. Thank you so much. I hope it was good enough. As I told you, go through all these concepts, repeat them within your mind. If you want to be 100% sure, go and write those what you understood, right, in a notebook, and I think that should make you good to appear for the exams. So I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much, and you all have a good day. Bye bye.